January is over. My reading goal for the year is 40 books, which is more than I have ever read in a year ever. And I feel like that may have been a little bit too conservative because I have just continued prioritizing reading quite a bit. And I read 7 books in January. So I thought I would share with y'all the books that I've read in January. Most of them are in the romantasy genre, with one nonfiction book that was really good, and that's actually the one that I started January off with. So the first book that I read was Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism, and this was, I'd say, did I give it 4 or 5 stars? It was a really good read. I think I gave it 5 stars. Relatively short, like 300 pages, I think. And it was really fascinating. The author, she sort of dove into like where the term cult comes from, and then how that term has evolved from sort of the religious cult type terminology to embody other things, more modern, like groups who get a little bit fanatic about certain brands or beauty products, or even workout, like gyms, like I think CrossFit was one of the things that she talked about, and how each of these things has its own language and sort of makes people feel like they belong. And she interviewed a couple people who were in actual cults that had a tragic event. So trigger warning, like discussion of like mass suicide and group suicide. But overall, really good read, really fascinating. Gave my brain a break from the romantasy for a hot second. The second book I read was The Book of Doors, and I think I rated this 4 stars. Another really, really good read. Not your typical sort of fantasy. It's set on Earth, like normal humans, and then the overall idea is that there are these magical books in the world, and depending on what book you have, that book grants you a certain power. Really good story, and the way it ended made me gasp because of what was implied. Really enjoyable read. Again, not your typical fantasy, so really, really enjoyed that. I think that was also a relatively short read, 300 to 400 pages maybe. And I've read all of these on Kindle, because I just don't have the space to buy all the books. I don't have a space allocated for all the books that I want to physically buy yet. So I have that mulling around in my mind, like where do I want my little library? So the next 2 books I read were in a series, and these were, so I read One Dark Window and 2 Twisted Crowns. I think that's right. I don't have it on my Kindle anymore. Really good. Not super spicy if you're not into spicy romantasy, but there is some, or was there a little bit of spice maybe in the second book? Not a lot, not memorable in terms of that, but in terms of like world building and this idea that it's sort of like the Book of Doors almost, in that if you possess a certain type of card from this deck, you get a certain kind of magic. And so really interesting, like world building and form of magic that you just sort of don't see in most fantasy, in my opinion, that I have read. But really enjoyable. I think I gave both of those a 4 star. no complaints. I thought they were a good read. The next book I read that I gave 5 stars to was Phantasma. I loved this book. I know some people have complained that some of the writing was not there or whatever, but for me, this book had it was a little bit different because it's about like devils and phantoms and ghosts, so it's more on the paranormal side of things, and there is an element of magic and sort of people having special powers. And I thought everything in this book, I don't know, I loved it. I loved the story, I loved the idea of the story. Blackwell is the perfect main male character, in my opinion. Loved him. For the most part, loved the main female character. A little bit frustrating at times, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I felt like I was left with a gaping hole in my heart when I finished that book. And there's going to be a follow-up, but with the main character's sister. So I will probably end up reading it. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I think people's opinions on it, though, are very different. Some people absolutely love it, and some people absolutely hate it. For me, good pace, 5 stars. I was all about it. The 6th book I read was Nocticadia. And this one I struggled to rate. I think I have it as a 4 on Goodreads, but maybe a 3.75. It was much darker than I was expecting. Also, my fault, I didn't really read the trigger warnings in the beginning. A very, very slow burn. I have a hard time classifying this one as like fantasy because it's more dark academia, real dark. And there's a little bit of like an occult theme throughout, but I'm gonna say light on the fantasy. Again, set in the real world, like Earth, East Coast of the USA. Real good slow burn, very spicy towards the end. After that slow burn builds up, some people will feel uncomfortable about the age gap, professor-student romance thing. The writing was really good, but for me, there were parts of it that were really, really dark, and I almost didn't continue with it because of the opening scene. Like, I had a very visceral reaction. So props to the author because it was so visceral. Like, it caused such a reaction that I was like, I don't know if I can continue with this. I did enjoy it, but not to the extent of Phantasma. Again, it was really dark. Some dark themes. Read those trigger warnings. So I'm gonna say 3.75 to 4 as a rating, just because I have some very complex feelings about it, and it's not one that I would necessarily want to read again. So that was book 6, and then book 7 is, of course, Onyx Storm, which I did buy a hardcover of after ordering it on my Kindle, which I could go into a whole thing about how it's a little deceiving that you buy a digital book but you're not actually buying it, that it is only licensed to you. So I would like to buy more physical books. I just need the space because I find that super frustrating. that being said, Onyx Storm. I am lucky because I literally read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame in December 2024, so I didn't have to wait that long. Especially after having to reread the end of Iron Flame a few times to make sure that I knew exactly what was happening. And I don't know, I enjoyed Onyx Storm quite a bit. Again, I found it paced well. There was a lot going on, some world building. The dragons continue to be my favorite. I just love the way that they sound in my head. And again, I finished it and then just wanted to scream into the void. So I think I gave that a 4 out of 5. It was just an enjoyable read for me, and some people are going to be super opinionated on it again. They didn't like this, they didn't like that. If I enjoy a book and I would read it again, like, I don't know. I didn't think the writing was bad. It is what it is. It's not high fantasy, and I am a high fantasy reader, and I read these kind of fantasy books specifically to get away from the absolute drag that high fantasy can sometimes have. So again, Onyx Storm, I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was bad. I can't wait for the next one, but I understand it's gonna take a while, and this is not my first rodeo. If I could wait for the Harry Potter books all those years ago, I can wait for the next in this series. I have plenty of books between now and then to read. So those are all my January reads. I have already finished one for February, so I've already got those books underway. I like to have multiple books going at one time because I may not always be in the mood for one of them. I am trying to get through Children of Dune, which is a bit of a struggle. I really have to be in the mood for that one. And then I'm reading Spark of the Everflame, and I think this will be the month that I buy the next book in the Stormlight archive. That is the last book. So the previous book before this one that just came out in the Stormlight archive is the one I read before I read ACOTAR and then went down this romantasy genre, because it was a lot and it was very heavy, and I feel like I'm gonna have to go watch a recap or read a recap because so much happens in those books. But I think it's time to go for one of those again, and it will be that one. So many things to read. And then I'm also reading, I do have a nonfiction book that I am working through called Unwell Women, about women in medicine, which I had stopped reading so I could read Onyx Storm. So I will pick that up again just to get some nonfiction into my reading this month. But off to a strong start. I didn't think I would read that many books, but as I keep finding with so many of these books, I hit a certain point and then I just cannot put them down, and that's okay. I'm finding them a really nice distraction right now too, which I think is really needed, and it keeps me from scrolling, so it's good stuff. But those are my January reads, and I would love to know what y'all are reading and if you've read any of the same things. If you're gonna put Onyx Storm spoilers in the comments, please mark them as such. I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't had time to read it yet, because it is relatively new, but I would love to know what you've been reading, and you can follow me on Goodreads. Probably gonna move to Fable Storygraph. I just struggle with the UI, so I will leave links down there. And I'm gonna finish cleaning on this Sunday afternoon, and there's a football game on in a bit, and I'm gonna make clam chowder. Jay is in a meeting. I have finished all my meetings for the day, but I still have work to do. I am just feeling so exhausted and tired. It is so gray outside. I moved my bar class to Wednesday. But I did get books. My book order arrived. I'm very much looking forward to reading this Wintering the Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. It's a relatively short book. I am going to start Throne of Glass. Unfortunately, this is not the book art that I wanted, but it's all they had. And then I did order a hard copy of Phantasma because I love Blackwell. And I will read this more than once. I read it last month. And I can't wait for it. Or can't wait to read it again. I'm so tired. Vogue got groomed. She's in the other room sleeping. She looks great, and I'm gonna fill up my water and then go back to work. I have taken Vogue for her walk. Let's not fall down the stairs now. One day we will buy carpet. Where is my dog? I just caught pigeons eating birdseed. They're not robins, but you know what? At least there are birds eating what I have up. Oh, it's so dark. I've been listening to this podcast on BBC, well, on Spotify, that my friend Sarah, who lives in Canada, recommended. And it's about witches and why so many people identify with being a witch, the history of witchcraft, how in the centuries before, accusing women of being a witch was basically a way to kill women. I mean, I'm oversimplifying the cultural and patriarchal reasoning behind the desire to do that, but it has been a very, very good podcast. I've just started episode 4. It's been very impactful. And it's good timing too. I'm reading this book, Unwell Women, that I started reading because I thought it was just going to be about the history of why women haven't been a focus in the medical field, and it has turned out to be so much more than that, and it has been really heavy and really, really, really impactful as well. So given everything that's going on in the world right now, I will link below, but those two pieces of media are really, really hitting deep right now. Even in the podcast, they said something chilling about how, when was this? I think this was 1600s in Germany, when a bunch of women were accused of witchcraft and they were killed. And someone was saying the societal structures were changing and land ownership needed to change. And basically, in order to make that big of a change, new stories needed to be told, and new rules, and it just gave me chills. And there was an incredible parallel to what is happening in the United States right now. And it made me sick a little bit, and I kind of wanted to cry because it was just, again, it gave me chills. And it's that women and minorities have always been targeted when something needs to change. So, or when men start to lose power and need to redefine that power. It was a lot. So those have sort of been influencing my thoughts lately. That sounds kind of sinister. Just those have been weighing heavy on my mind, especially as everything going on back in the US continues at an exhausting rate. So, but reading those has been really good. So I don't have that much time this morning to devote to personal projects. I tripped and slipped and fell yesterday on that back door and absolutely destroyed my shin. Doesn't look like it's bruised, but it is swollen and it hurts. It's super annoying. I am in the process of starting up a new blog, like lifestyle blog, to go with my vlog. And instead of using WordPress, I am using Astro and Netlify. And I'm really happy with the way the design is coming along. I locked in on a typeface yesterday, and I think it's perfect. So I'm pretty happy about that. Title, I can't figure out why this isn't. Why is that not going the full length of the main width? That would be why. I'm going to guess. Yes. Okay. So I need to change that main width 100%. I actually don't even know. Do I need to put that there? Let's see. No, I don't. Okay. Boom. last week. I remembered my UK number off the top of my head, and I think I've forgotten it already this week. I'm just going to order some of these Lululemon shirts. What card am I going to use? If you ever live abroad and you are still, so if you're an American and you still have an American card that you use and you use PayPal, never ever let them do the conversion for you. Because your bank will have a better exchange rate. Alright, just buying a couple Lululemon tops. Because that's the vibe I've been like after lately. I don't know. It's so funny. I've had these tops that my mother bought me ages ago that are super sporty, and I didn't wear them for the longest time, and then I kind of started to wear them more because they're just comfy and warm, and then I started Pilates and they're perfect for Pilates, and now I'm being influenced to buy Lululemon things. So that's great. I thought about buying Sweaty Betty, but really didn't see anything that I wanted long sleeve top wise. It's unrelated to that. It's super fascinating. I have all these influencers websites up, and they have all really like abandoned posting to their blog and going all in on social media, and I think that's absolutely wild to me. Just as someone who works in tech and works on the web and is very much like, you should own your content and make sure it gets shared across like multiple platforms. Use social media to drive people to your content, your site that you own. Even if you start a Substack or a newsletter, like, you still technically don't own your content. So I think owning your own content and your own website and your own blog is great. However you do that is fine. WordPress is great if you don't know what you're doing and if you want to start quickly. My old lifestyle blog, the Irma's Homestead, is on WordPress. I need to migrate it to a new hosting provider. I need to do that soon. Anyway, but it was like overkill for what I really needed, and I'm now like redoing this new, or building a new blog in just like code and using markdown files, and I just like how much more control I can have over it. And the reason I've never really coded one from scratch before is just because it's time consuming, and so I'm sort of taking my time and doing it to make sure I get it to how I want it to be. And I really like the way that it is shaping up. So I'm not sure what has happened with my design skills, but it's almost like, I almost feel like, even though I haven't been doing design full time, something in my website design has sort of clicked, and I like what I'm building. So I'm quite happy with that. But I'm out of time, so I'm gonna go upstairs and change and hop on for my actual job.